Today, we're at Mana Contemporary to interview Pol Morton. Pol is a painter that I got the honor of meeting a couple weeks ago at their solo show at Olympia Arts, and I'm so excited for you guys to hear about them. Come on in. Pol, babes,
Hey.
How are ya? Good to see ya.
So excited to have you here.
Oh my God, this place is gigantic.
I know.
This is amazing. Okay, well, let's... Hello, ladies, gentlemen, and those in between. I'm Sam Blank. Today, I am joined by Pol Morton. Pol, you're an artist who is chronically ill and non-binary, working with assemblage paintings, sculpture, and photo documentation. Your work navigates themes of disability, queerness, and transness. You earned a BFA from Maryland Institute College of Art and recently graduated from Hunter MFA. Your work has been exhibited in numerous galleries, including Olympia Arts, Swivel, Storage, the Gallery at Strut, and the Beijing American Center. You've also been featured in publications like the New York Times, Observer, and Hyperallergic. Thank you for having us in your studio. It's lovely. It's great to be here with you today. How are you feeling?
Feeling great. Very excited to have you here.
Thank you. I want to begin with your time in China. When I was doing the research, I was amazed that a lot of your first solo shows your first solo show and a lot of your first shows outside of your BFA were in Beijing. You were a part of multiple shows, and you spent time in the Beijing 798 Art District. How did you come to show so much work there? How did you get there?
So after undergrad, I actually moved to Beijing for 4 years and had friends in the art world, became part of the art world. But I mean, there are a lot of, like every major city, there are a lot of art worlds in every, once you enter the art world, it turns out it's lots of different pockets. So I was in Beijing and making art while I was there and showing art while I was there.
And what brought you to Beijing?
A lot of different things, I would say. It's something that I tried to figure out over time. I would say initially I visited right after graduating from undergrad and had never felt more at home anywhere. And I tried to unpack that experience because that's a weird sensation to go somewhere that you've never been before, but feel all of a sudden the most in you.
And do you speak Mandarin?
Yes, a certain amount. I didn't study it in school, but I do really like languages. So, and I had a lot of friends where that was our primary shared language, or that was the language we used to communicate.
So you moved there and you moved to the Arts District, or you lived? No,
I moved to the Second Ring Road and then eventually moved closer to the Arts District. And my roommate and best friend was working in 798.
Okay.
And so that was part of that.
And the Beijing American Center, is it owned by the U.S. government? How did you get involved with that?
Yes, it's through the embassy. So the embassy has sort of like an art gallery, and then they put on shows. So we're gonna just call it like it is, soft power vibes. But even so, I don't know if this goes in the high interview, but for example, I wasn't allowed to put all of some of my art was too, I would say sexual, or too sexually violent to be included in my show.
Yeah, when I was looking them up, there's not a ton of information about it. It's a little bit under wraps as a space.
Oh, interesting. For shows now. I think that for me, one of the things that I notice is also that it actually was a long time ago. Time works funny, but so does the internet. And when I was growing up, even though I grew up in the Bay Area, the internet wasn't really a thing. And even in undergrad, the internet wasn't really a thing. And obviously, whether or not you're dealing with a firewall, a lot of information wasn't really put online in the same ways that it is now. And social media isn't the same. So,
And you, I want to move, because you talk about this in your MFA paper, you had a bike accident in Beijing that really changed your work.
Yeah. I only get into the silliest bicycle accidents. They always sound like America's Funniest Home Video vibes. I was biking into 798, which is the arts, or one of the arts districts, and a parking garage arm came down on my head. So, but it was a whiplash concussion. There was like this split second of, do you brake as hard as you can and lean back, or do you try to bike as quickly as you can and get under this piece of falling steel? And I went for brake and lean back. I think if I'd gone the other way, it would have broken my neck. So I think I'm only alive because I made the decision I made, but then I got hit in the face with a piece of falling steel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you were wearing a helmet?
Yes, but it doesn't protect your face.
Yeah, it does not protect your face, but no brain damage.
Oh yeah, no, we helmets are important.
Helmets.
Yeah.
Helmets.
Wear
your helmet. Get MIPS.
Well, the second major bicycle accident concussion I had, I don't know if you're going to get to it later.
Please go into it.
Was that a cat ran under, I was biking around the loop at Prospect Park, and a cat ran under my wheel, which is, again, unexpected. You don't expect a house cat or any cat in Prospect Park, and we hit each other. We both looked at each other, and then we hit each other, and I, again, was wearing a helmet, but it was not as tight as it should have been, so also tighten your helmets. And so it got kind of knocked a little bit to the side. I think it did, in fact, save my brain a lot, but I had a huge gash in my head and had to get a bunch of stitches. And you know what the Park Services doesn't like to do at Prospect Park? Get an ambulance in there. I couldn't walk, so.
And they wouldn't let an ambulance?
No, they let an ambulance in, but it's hard.
Okay.
It's just not easy.
Okay.
And then you have a bunch of other bicyclists swearing at you. It was really fun.
Beyond your bike accidents, your work is profoundly shaped by your queerness and your chronic illness. I was really especially struck when I first saw your work by the use of your mobility devices as a tracing tool to separate your canvases. Can you talk about the influence that led you to incorporating that in your work?
So I think a lot about my painting cane can as a love letter to my walking cane. And I've used my wheelchair wheels. I've used physically drilling canes into the sides of canvases. I've used cane tips, little rubber tips. So in all of these cases, a lot of it is that accessibility devices they're like my best friend. They are assistive devices. They are supportive. If it weren't for my wheelchair, when I needed my wheel, I'd be stuck in bed. And so a lot of times when I see someone on the street, they'll say, "Oh no, how soon till you can get out of your wheelchair?" Or what? But the answer is the wheelchair is what opens doors, what allows me to enter into the world. So, all love for assistive devices. So in terms of using them to draw or trace on canvases, it seems really obvious because it's basically an extension of my body. That when I use canes on and off, I've been in a wheelchair many times in my life. I've been bedbound for way over a year of my life cumulatively for things starting from when I was born, that I have a heart condition, a blood condition, I've had tumors, radiation treatments, all kinds of kidney stones, you name it. Everything also gets more and more rare. I had arthritis starting in high school. So I've sort of used assistive devices throughout my life at different times, more sometimes or less depending. But when I'm using my cane, it is with me at all times. And it's an extension of me. So you feel that you're painting with your body, you might as well use part of your body in the work as well. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does that sound good, or am I simplifying it?
No, it's an interesting question. I'm looking at the art, I'm wait a second. For this one in particular, for that one in particular, I was thinking about, I did a lot of animation in undergrad, a lot of hand-drawn animation as well as stop motion, but for animation in general, there's an element of time, but in hand-drawing, you have all of these still images, and then together they form a time-based work. And so for me, even though a painting is still, there are a lot of ways that time can be embedded, whether that's with something reflective, so like sequins, that no matter what angle you're coming at it from, it will keep changing when it is reflective. And same goes for repetition, that when you have whether that's a photo of my foot in many different ways, whether that's an outline of my foot, whether that's my cane drawn over and over, every time you have a multiple of something, you've kind of embedded the concept of time.
Would you say because they're sort of a comforting thing you always see, it's a way of introducing comfort into your paintings, or?
I think of them more as characters than comfort.
Okay.
So I think they are stand-ins. They're kind of stand-ins for me, but I think that also because my feet and my ankle have had different states of being, there is this journey that they're on that I'm party to, but I feel like it's my feet that are doing the journey and I'm just along for the ride.
Amazing. Alrighty. Let's take a quick break and we'll be right back with Pol Morton. Thank you. Okay. I want to shift to some other non-art topics now. How does navigating the market influence your creative process? Because you do show in a lot of commercial spaces.
The market has its own mind. So the market also, there are kind of in many ways, many different markets, to whom you're selling or where you're selling or what you're selling can also shift. Whether that's selling to someone you've met already or selling to a stranger, that also is in flux constantly. So I think that yes, there is the market and everyone talks about the market, but then there's also the fact that everyone kind of needs art in their life, whether they know it or not.
And the market sells papers. Yeah. Okay. So you don't find in your working process when you're looking through those sketchbooks.
Oh, do I think about the market when I'm making? Absolutely not. Oh, heaven forbid. Yeah. Absolutely not. Yeah. No, I would never in a million years consider that. I mean, maybe, maybe one I don't think the market has any place in my studio. That I will make what I need to make. But I think that's the thing is I took 10 years in between undergrad and grad. I've lived so many different lives. I used to be a competition tap dancer. And I danced in Las Vegas as a child, at competitions. That's I did that for 10 years. So there are a lot of ways that one moves through the world, but I have throughout all of that always made art. And you just have to make what you need to make.
And
it'll sell or it won't sell. Yeah.
Do you feel like your sort of separate hustling, having a job always allows you to feel more comfortable in what you make? Or is it really just, I'm making what I make the money that I make, everything else is in the wash?
That can shift. At one point I had an actual desk job for 1 year where I had an office job and I hated it so much that and we mean office job that had nothing to do with art. I made it as art oriented as I could, i.e. I was editing videos and things so there were ways that I was learning, but also then there's office politics. Then you're wasting a bunch of time getting coffee or having lunch with coworkers. And so I in fact asked if I could come in at midnight and leave at 8 in the morning. So I went full graveyard and would sleep during the day and paint when I could during the day and then work through graveyard shift. And then I promised myself never again. So that lasted a year. And then I sort of made myself a promise that I would only ever do art related jobs, however many I needed. And that also, I have a very broad definition for what that means. So I include voiceover work. I include a lot of things in whether it's obviously teaching glass blowing is obviously art, working galleries, And so, or like illustration or making logos, which definitely are out there, but mostly I don't hold myself to the same. I'm not like, I didn't go to school for illustration. So, and I love illustration, but I also love what I can learn illustrating that then comes back to my personal work, but I don't consider it to be my work. Like, that's just a job.
And do you have an art-related job right now, or has this residency sort of provided you a space to just...
This residency has provided me with space, and they have a small stipend, or not a stipend, but like a small amount of money they give you. But then also, basically, after different, depending on what my medical stuff is doing, I'm either able to work or I'm not. And so, yeah.
And this residency sounds kind of amazing. Do you want to quickly plug the residency for those watching?
So the Monira Foundation, or the Monira Residency, is at Mana Contemporary in Jersey City. They also have other locations, one in Chicago, for example. And the residents, there are dance residents, dance residencies. Some are like kind of archive / photo or printmaking. Like, it can sort of like, you can make your own art depending on what you're doing, but they do have they also have other specific residencies. But it is a year studio for free, 500 square feet, 30-foot ceilings, a sink in your space. And I know that I always talk about the sink because a sink in your space is really sexy. Like, oh my God. Like, no one ever talks about how sexy a sink is. That is like, obviously space is incredible, but a sink is a game changer.
Yeah.
Everyone should apply.
And it's MONIRA Foundation at Mana Contemporary. This space is lovely. I highly recommend. Let's get back to the, when I first met you at your artist talk at Olympia, you and Ali briefly discussed your working relationship. It sounds like I think I know the answer is based on what you said about the market, but do the needs of a gallerist or dealer ever influence you?
Curatorially, yes. In terms of like, once the work is done and in the gallery, yes. Do I ever make something because someone says to? No. I mean, that's not to say, I have definitely made either a site-specific work, or I've made work that was to like group shows that had, I was in an amazing group show at Latitude Gallery that was all about sort of a connection between art communities. And so there was like this rule that you had to have like a red line or element that went from one side to the other, so then all the pieces kind of create this full space connect. So that I made like a specific piece for that. Christian Stiver and Dominic Terlizzi curated a show, was that also last year? Maybe it was 2 years ago, in Greenpoint, in like a public park that had this colonnade, and each artist that they invited to be part of it was given a tarp and a ratchet strap, and then asked to make a piece that could be ratchet strapped around 2 columns each. And so like pieces like that, and that was actually really exciting because I ended up making a piece that you could see from both sides and had holes through it, so you could actually kind of almost interact with the piece and look through all these little moments that was like covered in cat hair, covered in my pubes, and like also a lot of bird seed. And so like there are pieces that I'll make for specific shows where there is a specific prompt, but other than that, no.
So you'll be prompted to do curatorial things, but you've never been beholden to like I need 3 8x11 drawings or I'm not gonna sell anything.
No.
Okay. Work.
Not to say that, I mean, like, see, like that I can actually handle. If someone's like, this is the size. Yeah. Like, Visual AIDS does a postcard sale to help artists living with AIDS. And I, for the past couple of years, have donated a piece to that. So again, like that's postcard size. Like there are, parameters aren't like, that's not like a dead end for me. But in terms of someone saying like, oh, I need you to make like more, like use more oil paint or use more something, like when it's like dealing with the making of the work or the content of the work. Yeah, hard stop.
You're sort of just like, sell what I give you.
Yeah. Or don't.
Or don't.
Like, I mean, it doesn't have to go in the gallery, right?
Exactly.
Like, that's up to them. But if I make something I don't believe in, I don't think I can. Like, that's not you'll be able to tell.
Yeah. And I think I also, this is probably the same vein, but when you're setting up a show, how much does the gallerist get a say in your curatorial vision? Or is it really you show up, you say, I want this here, here, here? Is it
that depends on the gallery.
Okay.
That could be anything. Like, that's absolutely up to the gallery owner, the curator, whatever the structure is. Plenty of gallerists have very specific visions, and I love that. I actually I love both. Sometimes there's someone who's like, this is exactly what I want, let's do this. And I'm like, okay, great, I can like let go of the reins. Whereas like, what was really beautiful, what I really loved about working with Ali at Olympia was the fact that I had a basic sense of what I wanted in that space. And I knew the space well enough to be like, okay, I have this kind of planned out in my head. And Ali also had sort of senses of like what pieces they were interested in. And so then together we had like an amazing day where we were just like carrying paintings and like moving them around. But that's true of a lot of galleries where you often will end up working with, I mean, it just depends, but it's not my only experience with that kind of format. And I love that format.
And that gallery has that awesome window wall.
Yes.
Was that a hard decision for picking what was going to go there?
I kind of knew what I wanted to go there, partly because natural light has a lot of power over oil paint.
Yeah.
That it wasn't my first piece that I'd had in a window. I had been invited to be part of a group show at Peninsula. An amazing painter named Whit Harris invited me to be in a show there in like a large group show, and my piece was in the window for that. And so I think that was the first time I had ever had a piece in the window, and it sort of sparked the like, oh right, like red paint or like paint really does respond to different lighting situations very differently.
And especially because you have sequins in your work.
Yes.
It's like,
and sequins where I really wanted that to catch the light.
I have to, when I see Ali next, I have to ask them if that awesome window wall raises their rent at all, or it's just part of it. Because I'm just like, it's so, for a gallery, oh my God.
Well, I think they designed it.
Oh, wow.
Like, I don't know, double check, but like the way that things go in there, I sort of wonder what it looked like before they moved into that space.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what it was doing before that, but I know that like the way that you hang work in the space is something that I think they conceived of.
Okay, awesome. Now, I just want to quickly, because you've gone a lot of places, lived a lot of places, been a lot of things. I kind of want to just run through your career path sort of so the audience can hear all the options artists can have to take their life. So you first went to art school. I want to know what made you want to do a BFA and what exactly was your concentration?
I had a sense I didn't know you could be an artist, if that makes sense. Like when I was I have always made art. Like, who hasn't always made art? That's, the most common response, like that, but I remember the art teacher in my high school being like, oh, well, so you'll obviously have to, I went to a public high school, but the art teacher at this public high school was like, oh, you'll want to put a portfolio together so that when you apply for art school. And I was like, say what? That's not a thing. Is that a thing? That's not a thing. What? So that hadn't even occurred to me at first. But then once that became sort of part of my realm of consciousness, like in the same way that like all of a sudden, like now I have the word non-binary. When I was little, I knew I was non-binary. I knew I wasn't a girl and I knew I wasn't a boy. And there was just no word for what I was. And I felt so upset internally for so long until I found that word. And
so the gays really ate with that word, I have to say. The gays really ate with that word, I have to say. It's so good.
It's so good. Yeah. It's so good. So I think that like one of the, like in that same way, when all of a sudden art school became a concept, I was like, oh, well that, okay. And if I really want to be an artist, then I really actually want to do the thing. Mm-hmm. So that was sort of how MICA came to be. I wanted to be as far away from California as possible. So 3,000 miles away was perfect. Yeah.
I'm from Maryland, so I did apply to MICA, of course.
Yeah.
Did you ever go to, because did you do ceramics while you were there, or you didn't start that till later?
I did not. Yeah, okay. I was just doing glass blowing while I was there, but they don't have a glass program. So I was at a local, I did some glass blowing at my public high school. Mm-hmm. And because California, but also like, the guy who started it, like started a bunch of hot shops all across the country and was amazing. Mm-hmm. So I actually already had that skill a little bit. So that was my so that was my day job outside of school. And then I helped in the gallery. I ran classes and actually ended up teaching summer classes to MICA students. So my peers, but off campus.
Mm-hmm. And so you graduate school in 2009, kind of a rough year to graduate.
Yes.
But you pretty quickly go to China right after. Mm-hmm. We talked about why you chose to go to China. You took a trip just for graduation, or?
I was visiting my cousin.
Okay.
And then there were so many things that I can pinpoint, because it was a very visceral response that my body had to being there. And so I think part of it was actually that like it was actually very smoggy when I visited. So everyone was like, oh, well, you can't really see the sky, so like I don't, so like it's not a good like couple days to be here. But a lot of the smog was coal based at the time. I think obviously less so now. And when I was little, a lot of my relatives would run steam trains. So I spent a lot of my favorite memories from childhood. Those memories were from being in steam trucks, steam trains with my favorite relatives. So the smell of coal feels like home and happiness and safety. So in a lot of ways, I think to some extent, there was like a moment of like, everything smells like coal. And also I get there's an element of claustrophobia to the way I move through the world. I have large canvases, large avenues all speak to me. So yeah, a lot of it was also like the size and the scale of the city and how fast everything is moving. And it actually worked really well that when I ended up, I love a big city. The bigger the city, the better. In a lot of ways, I think that is about my bedbound time, that there's a sense when you are stuck in bed that like, oh gosh, this won't get done, or that needs to be done, and oh no, I'm like taken away from the world. But also like, there are so many responsibilities that we hold really, really deeply. And so one of the things I love about being bedbound when in a very large city is that I'm part of the anthill. Like everything else is moving around me, and that actually allows me to put down the load a little bit better, where I'm like, oh, nothing is coming to a standstill because I'm not participating. Mm-hmm. Like the world keeps moving. And I think for some people that's really uncomfortable as a concept. And for me, it's really comforting.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I like that.
Yeah, so I'm like, oh good.
Yeah.
Everything is happening. Like the world isn't only on my back. We're sharing this.
Yeah, and so how long after that first trip did you actually get your visa and get over there?
About a year. So I went back to Baltimore. Because the hot shop was such a small business, or like it was we had a lot of work, but also like there were only there were a handful of people running the hot shop, and I was doing a lot of things. And so I went back, stuck around to make sure that someone else was trained to do everything that I did. I didn't want to leave them in the lurch. So I went back for about a year and then moved, and then was in Beijing for 4 years, got into a bicycle accident, kind of spent like a month or two stuck in bed, not knowing I had a concussion. But also I didn't know what a concussion was. That like people didn't really talk about concussions, or people were starting to talk about concussions with regard to like sports and protecting like very particularly like young men in sports and in school, like school sports. And like, that was not an experience. I was not a young man doing school sports. So it just didn't occur to me that like I had a concussion or a brain injury at all. So I was like, well, I could tell I was sick, but I didn't know. I was like, do I have mono? Do I have, like, my mind was sort of racing with all these things, but also the way that my concussion manifested was light sensitivity, sound sensitivity. I literally couldn't leave my room and I couldn't turn on the lights in my room. I was like stuck in my room where I'd have to like, I had to quit all my jobs. I had just been like building like a lot of jobs or like actually like creating jobs for myself in other organizations and other institutions and like through museums, and everything just kind of collapsed around me. And then I couldn't leave my room, but I didn't really understand what was happening. But actually the way I found out I had a concussion to some extent was that I was in a group show. I was curated into a group show, and I wrote to them. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I would love to be part of your show. I cannot do this. And everyone, like a bunch of the organizers of the show were like, well, wait, we're really concerned about you. That sounds bad. And so they came, like they brought a car, they put me in the car and they took me to a hospital. So it was only because I was in this group show that I ever actually sought medical help. Other than that, I was just kind of like, and it took me after that, because I was so non-functional, I ended up coming back to the States because this is where I had access to insurance. This is where I had access to a lot of like more medical care and caretakers. And so I ended up, or in the States. And then basically I talked to my neurologist and he was like, because I was like, oh, well, can I go back? I'll get plane tickets for a month from now. And he was like, no, looking more like a year. So I spent basically a year like vaguely not functional.
Mm-hmm. And did you, after that year, go back to Beijing, or is that when you stayed in San Francisco and started to put
I went back to Beijing to like ship my work, like really move out fully, because I just sort of like had to just leave. That was really hard. I would say that like having a medical moment that ends a whole chapter of your life leaves there was like an unsettling experience around that, where you just don't actually get to kind of say goodbye to that person that you were, or even make like your autonomy for deciding what happens next in your life completely removed. And obviously there are a lot of ways that can manifest in one's life, but like that particular one was hard to come to terms with. But then once I moved out, I was just in San Francisco. I had jobs working in galleries. I was working as an artist assistant. So basically I slowly built my working life and like doing voiceovers for toys because I had done other voice work. So I sort of built my life in San Francisco.
Mm-hmm. And you moved to New York before your MFA or just for the MFA?
For the MFA, like days before, like right before. Like I was still jet lagged.
So you moved to New York, you start the MFA. The MFA is 2 years. You finish the MFA and
3.
3. Oh, 100
And actually, because of the pandemic, 3.5.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So 3.5.
So it's basically a whole other undergrad.
Yeah. So you finished in 2022? Mm-hmm. Okay. So you started in 2019. Mm-hmm. Okay. So you do the MFA for 3.5 years. You graduate and you start the studio with your friends, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. And then from there, that's how you get to where we are today.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I left that studio to start this residency.
Mm-hmm. And is there any really crazy jobs you had that I didn't cover that you'd like to tell everyone about?
I mean, those were pretty much the main.
Okay.
Those are pretty much the main ones. Mm-hmm. I feel like also how one gets jobs can always be like a weird thing where it's like, oh, you're on some like ultimate frisbee listserv. I don't play ultimate frisbee, but somehow I got on the listserv, and that was how sometimes jobs would crop up. or whether that's telling someone that their logo kind of super looks like a swastika and maybe they should change that. And then they say, would you like to redesign our logo? And then I say, well, I guess, sure. So like that kind of thing. So I think there's also a way that like cobbling together a life can be a creative pursuit in and of itself.
Yeah. Amazing. So you're going to finish at Mana in a couple months. And what do you see next after Mana?
Greenpoint, I don't think that anyone could ever... I feel so lucky to have found a community that really is as supportive and supportively critical, like supportive while also being honest. And I think that that is really, really rare. And so that was one of the things that I had heard, that's what grad school is for. But like having that even after is a true blessing.
And then I just have one quick question. Did you plan this residency to be when the G wasn't working, so you didn't have to deal with that for Greenpoint?
No, I found that out afterward, but then was very pleased, but also felt really, really bad for the person who's subletting.
Before we go, I have one more question. So when I was researching for this interview, I found some of your old tweets. You said nothing terrible. Don't worry, you're not going to get canceled.
No. It's interesting because I tweet so infrequently.
Oh no, nothing was after.
Was it from San Francisco? Yeah. Were they all super sexual? So I know because I've only ever tweeted for. Yes, so there was an event. So my partner, my spouse is a sci-fi author, and so back when I was living in San Francisco, in a lot of ways, because I was so concussed when I moved to the Bay Area, then met my partner, and then met all of the friends that surrounded my spouse, because my partner is a sci-fi author, there were just I knew a lot of writers. I knew more writers than I knew artists in the Bay Area, and I probably still do actually, because I didn't have school. I was super brain boo-boo at the time, you find people through other people kind of thing. And so one of the events that we would go to is called Shipwreck. And I believe it may sometimes pop up, but at least at the time it was a competition where they would invite a handful of authors and they would take a work of great literature, and each of the contestants would be assigned a different character in the book, and then they would have to write the worst porn imaginable.
The one that I have here, you should have won for, I just have to say, because at 11:44 p.m. on May 5th, 2016, you tweeted, "Twinkle, twinkle, aftercare. I'm so glad that you're out there. #ShipwreckSF." I ate that up. That was so funny.
Cute. Okay, yeah.
Oh, thank you so much for being here with us today. Can you tell the people where they can find you?
Online on Instagram at Pol Morton, POLMORTON, or POLMORTON.com, or just email me. My email is on my website. I'm not hard to find.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you everybody for joining us this week. We are having these tell you to wear your helmet every single time you go on a bike, scooter, skateboard, anything. Brain trauma is not sexy. Being smart is sexy. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us this week. Thank you, Paul, for having us. And have a great day, everybody. Thank you.